Salut! Today we're going to go over lesson 32. This lesson covers the conditional present tense as well as how to use it. In the notes, there is also a small point on the expression faire plaisir, which is quite similar to the verb plaire we have seen before, and how to state your profession. I invite you to download the class notes using the link in the video description below and to check out these points as well. And remember to like this video if you like it, and to subscribe to this channel if you want to learn more about French and Saint-Esprit in New York. Alright, the conditional present tense. We have used it in a previous lesson to say we wanted something in a polite form. You may remember that we ask pourriez-vous rather than pouvez-vous, or pourrais-tu rather than peux-tu. This one is quite easy to put together, but let's first see when we use it. You have to keep in mind that English uses modal verbs. Modal verbs in English are auxiliary verbs that express necessity or possibility. English modal verbs include must, shall, will, should, would, can, could, may, and might. This means that in English, if I say I eat, I use the present. But by adding the modal auxiliary will, I can turn my sentence into a future and say I will eat. Well, most conditional present in French will match the modal could and would. Actually, they match the modal would. If you realize that the modal could is simply would be able to. What I mean is that when you see could, you will use the verb to be able to, which in French is pouvoir, and use the conditional French, because it is modified by would. Remember, could is the same as would be able to. I could do this is the same as I would be able to do this. Alright, so when you have the modal would, the verb coming right after is the verb that will be in the conditional present in French. So, I would eat would be the conditional of the verb manger. I think we're clear on this now. You see could, use the conditional of the verb pouvoir. You see would, use the conditional of the verb that follows. Of course, I'll mention some exceptions in the end. What fun would this class be if we didn't have exceptions? So, now that we have a basic base on when to use the conditional present, let's see how to put it together. You actually already know how to put it together. It's like Lego. You just need to know what goes where. We have seen many times that conjugating verbs is basically finding the root of a verb or stem and then adding endings for each person. Well, the conditional present is simply the root or stem of the future tense, which we have seen in lesson 31 last week, and then you add the endings of the imparfait. That's it. Some of you might be able to do this quickly, others might need a little push, so I'm going to give you several verbs conjugated in the conditional present so you can see it in action. Remember, the stem or root of verbs in the future are the infinitive for regular verbs ending in ER or IR, and for verbs ending in DRE, we remove the E. Then we saw last week some irregulars like the verb aller, whose stem is IR. Alright, the endings of the imparfait, as we have seen before, are AIS, AIS, AIT, IONS, IEZ, AIENT. So, putting together the stems of the future with the ending of the imparfait creates a conditional present. Let's do this. The verb aimer in the conditional present is conjugated as follows. Please repeat after me. J'aimerais, tu aimerais, il aimerait, nous aimerions, vous aimeriez, ils aimeraient. Oh, and while we see the verb aimer in the conditional, keep in mind that I would like and I would want are quite similar. So sometimes we may switch between the conditional of aimer and the conditional of vouloir to mean the same thing. Anyhow, Next, the verb partir in the conditional present is conjugated as follows. Please repeat after me. Je partirai, tu partirais, il partirait, nous partirions, vous partiriez, il partirait. Now, the verb prendre in the conditional present is conjugated as follows. Please repeat after me. Je prendrai, tu prendrais, il prendrait, nous prendrions, vous prendriez, il prendrait. Finally, the verb vouloir uses the irregular stem voudr in the conditional present, and it is conjugated as follows. Please repeat after me. Je voudrais, tu voudrais, il voudrait, nous voudrions, vous voudriez, il voudrait. All right, now let's see the conditional in sentences. As I said, we use the conditional present mostly when you see in English could or would. Now, most sentences with the conditional use another clause with the word if, si in French. Si brings up the condition that needs to be realized for something to happen. But bear in mind that sometimes it is only implied. But when this condition is stated with the word si in French, it uses the imparfait most of the time. What I mean by that is that the most common construction in French is one clause or half sentence that includes si with an imparfait, and then a second clause that uses the conditional present. For example, if you came to Paris, she would come too. Our first clause is if you came to Paris. So, following what I just said, it will use the imparfait and it will be si tu venais à Paris. Now, our second clause will use the conditional. Can you spot of which verb? She would come too. Would here modifies the verb to come. So we will use the conditional present of the verb venir. So the second clause in our sentence will be elle viendrait aussi. And our full sentence is si tu venais à Paris, elle viendrait aussi. Now, you have to keep in mind that sometimes in English you have could in the clause that states the condition, then would in the clause that states what would happen. This cannot happen in French. It is actually a huge mistake that has been made famous by the 1962 movie La Guerre des Boutons, where one of the kids' catchphrase is which would roughly translate, trying to translate the grammar mistakes, to if I would have known, I would not have come. So keep in mind that simple rule. The clause that includes if, cannot, under any circumstance, use another conditional. So, for example, if you could, you would come to Paris. Even though we have seen that could is the verb pouvoir in the conditional present, because it is part of the clause that has if in it, we will need to use an imparfait. And our sentence will be si tu pouvais, tu viendrais à Paris. So, to sum it up, we have seen that a clause with the word si will usually be in the imparfait, and we'll have another clause that uses the conditional present, aka what could or would happen if that condition is met. This is a good introduction to what we call in French la concordance des temps. This would translate to the sequence of tenses. Basically, sometimes you use a certain tense and it will bring up another tense. Here are some examples with the word si in the first clause where you can use different tenses. I know this seems to contradict what we just saw, but keep in mind that these are exceptions to the rule. The rule is still the most important and usual occurrence. So, you can use si with a present and then another present if what you're stating is an obvious correlation. For example, if it rains, I stay home. In this sentence, you remove any condition open to judgment and it's just a statement of facts. So we will indeed also say in French, s'il pleut, je reste chez moi. You can also use see with the present and then a future. This means that depending on your present state of mind, something will happen or not. It's not open to interpretation. For example, you can say, like in English, if you're lucky, you will see your boyfriend tonight. And in French, it will be, si tu as de la chance, tu verras ton petit ami ce soir. And finally, you can also use see with the present and then have a conditional. This is a bit similar to see with imparfait and then conditional, except it's anchored in the present. Like someone needs to make a decision now. For example, if you say, if you want, we could go to the beach. In this instance, we expect the person's mind to be made now, as we are discussing it. This is why we would say, si tu veux, on pourrait aller à la plage. It looks like it's raining right now, and I'm really sweaty because it's really humid in here. But hopefully, it's nice out while you're watching, and maybe you will go to the beach. Anyway, that's it for this lesson. I hope it was clear enough. I know all these examples and exceptions may be confusing, but trust me, it will get more obvious as you practice. And talking about practice, why don't you use the conditional present in the comments? Tell me what could or would happen this summer, and use a clause to tell me the condition for this to happen using the imparfait. For example, something like, if I won the lottery, I would move to Paris. Or, I would learn this lesson if you taught it correctly. In this last example, I switched around the clauses, so make sure you still use the right tense for the right clause and look for the word if or si in French. Alright, that's it for today. I hope you learned something and I'll see you in the next video. Au revoir. Ouh, fait chaud ici.